Today's lesson is Sydney, Australia's stunning harbour city. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Candice.
And today, Candice and myself are going traveling. We're going down to Australia, in fact, today. I've never been there myself. Have you been to Australia before, Candice?
No, I haven't, but it is somewhere that I'm very interested in traveling to.
Sounds like a great place. And, of course, I know that the author of our article, Kelsey, has traveled all over the world, and for sure she has been to Australia. More specifically, she's been to Sydney, Australia, which is the subject of today's lesson. Sydney, of course, is one of the major cities in Australia. And, of course, it's got lots of places to check out there, so that's why we're talking about it today. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's listen to the first part of our lesson, and we'll come right back.
Sydney, Australia's stunning harbour city. With metropolitan streets surrounded by sparkling waters, Sydney is a sight to behold. From the iconic Sydney Opera House to the famous Bondi Beach, there's an endless amount of things to see and do.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 metropolitan， 这个字是形容词，是大都市的或是大都会的意思。像是 In the early 20th century, metropolitan Paris was a site of artistic activity. 在20世纪初，巴黎都会区是艺文活动之地。或是 Megan likes the energy of a large metropolitan city. Megan 喜欢大城市的活力。
Okay, so once again, the title of today's article is Sydney, Australia's stunning harbour city. Now, if something's stunning, it is spectacular, it's fantastic. When you experience it, when you see it, you kind of stop in your tracks and you go, wow, that is so cool.
Yeah, it's strikingly attractive. There are so many things to recommend it. When you look at it, it takes your breath away.
Indeed, and we're also describing it as a harbour city, which means it's a city with a harbour. Just like here in Taiwan, we've got a couple of harbour cities. One of them is Kaohsiung, the other one is Geelong, and I think some other cities like Hualien have harbors as well. So Sydney indeed does have a harbor with ships coming in and going out all the time. Now let's take a look at the first sentence here. It says, with metropolitan streets surrounded by sparkling waters, Sydney is a sight to behold. Now, metropolitan has to do with a city. And, of course, the opposite of that would be rural.
Yeah, metropolitan usually refers to an urbanized area, but not only the city center. A metropole also includes the suburbs around the city and the towns around the city. So when they talk about the metropolitan streets, it's not necessarily only the city center. They're talking about Greater Sydney. So that would be a sight to behold. They say it must be quite a beautiful sight. When we say it's a sight to behold, we are thinking that it's something spectacular or it's something extraordinary or really beautiful. So, for example, the Northern Lights are a sight to behold. Is there anything else that you can think of that might be a sight to behold?
Well,
Roger?
yeah, the Northern Lights, I think, are a sight to behold. I suppose the wonders of the world are all sights to behold, like the Great Pyramids of Egypt, the Great Wall of China. Those are all sights to behold, and a sight here is referring to something that you look at, and behold just means you're looking at it and appreciating it. Now here in the next sentence it says, from the iconic Sydney Opera House to the famous Bondi Beach, there's an endless amount of things to see and do. Oftentimes when you talk about a specific travel destination, we use this pattern, from something to something, and then you give kind of a summary sentence at the end of that. So I guess about Taiwan, we could say from great night markets to stunning scenery on the East Coast, Taiwan is a must-visit place.
Yes, and of course, Sydney Opera House is iconic. Something that's iconic is when you think of it, you connect it to a place or a time. And in this case, when you think about Sydney, you often connect it to the Sydney Opera House. So this is quite an amazing architectural feat. It's quite well known because of its unique design.
Indeed. So that's part of the range of things you can see there from the Opera House to Bondi Beach. There's a lot of things to check out in Sydney, Australia. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Let's move on now to the second part. We will listen first.
Known as the Harbour City, Sydney is famous for its beautiful waterfront location. There's no better way to experience Sydney Harbour than a sightseeing cruise. Most ferries depart from Circular Quay, which is also the perfect jumping-off point for your Sydney adventure. Nearby is the world-famous Sydney Opera House, an elegant building on the water known for its white sail-shaped roofs. Join a tour of the building, or better yet, see a show while you're there.
第二部分我们看到名词 sightseeing， 它的意思是观光或是游览。例如 My favorite holiday activities are sightseeing and trying new foods. 我最喜欢的假日活动是观光和品尝新食物。或是 Mr. Wilder went to London for a business trip, but he didn't have any time for sightseeing. Wilder 先生因公前往伦敦，但他完全没有时间观光。接着我们看到不及物动词 depart， 它的意思是启程、出发或是动身。这个字之后常接 from 或是 for 加名词。例如 The train departs from the station every morning at 9 o'clock sharp. 火车每天早上9点整从车站出发。或者 Lisa departed for Paris early yesterday morning. Lisa 昨天一早便启程去巴黎。另外延伸这个字的名词 departure， D-E-P-A-R-T-U-R-E departure， 指离开、启程或是出发。举例来说 We must delay our departure until the storm leaves the area. 我们必须延后出发，直到暴风雨离开这个区域。或是 The flight's departure time has been changed from 8:35 to 9:10. 那班飞机的出发时间已从8点35分改到9点10分。接着我们看到单字 elegant， 这个字是形容词，意思是优美的、高雅的或是雅致的。举例来说 Clarissa is known for her elegant sense of style. 大家都知道 Clarissa 的品味很优雅。或是 The diners spoke in low voices at the elegant restaurant. 在那间高级餐厅用餐的客人低声交谈。
Okay, so again, we're talking about Sydney, and a lot of cities around the world have nicknames, like Paris is the city of light, Chicago is the windy city, New York is the Big Apple. So here, Sydney is known as the Harbour City, and please note the difference in spelling here. The title of our article is spelled without the U, but if you're in the UK and other Commonwealth countries, you will see this spelling Harbour.
Yes, I'm from South Africa, so we also use the British spelling. So if you go to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, any former British colony would probably still use that spelling. But in the USA, you would drop the U. So that's just another cultural difference and a spelling difference.
Well, Webster revised several words in English, so lots of words that had the ORU ending dropped the U. But that's another subject for another day. But in any case, Sydney is known as the Harbour City, and it's known for its famous, beautiful waterfront location. Waterfront means next to the water, whether it be the ocean or the harbor. And so in this case, if you're in Sydney, it's going to have beautiful scenery with the city right next to the bay.
And it goes on to say there's no better way to experience Sydney Harbour than a sightseeing cruise. So when you're in Sydney, the best way to experience it is to enjoy a cruise. So if you go sightseeing, the word, if you break it up, you see the sights, sightseeing. So when you're on the cruise, you get to see some of the landmarks and you get to enjoy all of those famous things that you see in the tourist handbooks.
Okay, now here, let's move on to the next sentence. It says, most ferries depart from Circular Quay, which is also the perfect jumping-off point for your Sydney adventure. Now, of course, in this sentence, we have the word ferry, which refers to a boat that carries passengers and vehicles from one place to another. And the only ferry I know, well, there are a couple of ferries here in Taiwan. I think there's one down in Kaohsiung that goes out to Qijing Island. And there's another ferry that crosses the Danshui River at Danshui, goes over to Bali. But in this case, if you're riding a ferry, they will leave from or depart from a place called Circular Quay. And, of course, that is also a jumping-off point for your Sydney adventure. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is in water cities like Venice, they would stop at multiple stops. So a ferry would stop at multiple stops. And then in Venice, it's called a water bus or a water taxi. So it's like a taxi or a bus on the water. Moving on to the next sentence. Nearby is the world-famous Sydney Opera House, an elegant building on the water known for its white sail-shaped roofs. Of course, this is the iconic building that we all think about when we hear the name Sydney. It's synonymous with the harbour city.
Indeed, that's what we all see in the tourist posters and pictures on the internet of Australia. They almost always show the Sydney Opera House. And let's describe that building. It says here it is an elegant building on the water, and it's known for its white sail-shaped roofs. If something's elegant, it's high class, it costs a lot of money, and in this particular case, indeed, it is a high-class, elegant, wonderful building, and it's right next to the harbor there. And, of course, its famous feature is that its roof, or the roofs in the different sections of the Opera House, are sail-shaped. They're shaped like the sails of boats.
Yes, and when we talk about elegant here, we're referring to its design, its architecture, which is really quite unique and fits in with the theme of Sydney being the harbour city. So you can join a tour of the building or, better yet, see a show while you're there. So there's lots to do in Sydney, Australia. And if you're not going to watch a show or an opera at the Sydney Opera House, you can still experience its beauty by joining a tour.
So there you go. That's a good place to check out in Sydney, the Sydney Opera House. And, of course, you can take ferries all over the place as well. Okay, let's move on to the third and final portion of our article for today and talk some more about Sydney, Australia.
Another must-see is the Sydney Harbour Bridge, an enormous steel structure affectionately nicknamed the Coat Hanger due to its arch-based design. If you're feeling adventurous, you can even book a tour to climb up the 134-meter-tall bridge. For a more relaxing architectural experience, visit the nearby Queen Victoria building. Originally a market, this beautiful 19th century building has been transformed into a high-end shopping center. After browsing the shops, treat yourself to high tea under crystal chandeliers at the QVB Tea Room.
第三部分我们看到单字 adventurous， 这个字是形容词，指有冒险精神的或是惊险刺激的。例如 Josh is an adventurous eater. He'll try just about anything, no matter how strange. Josh 对吃的很有冒险精神，他什么食物都敢尝试，不管多么奇怪。或者 Gail has an adventurous spirit and often does exciting things. Gail 富有冒险精神，时常做刺激的事情。最后我们看到单字 crystal， 这个字是形容词，指水晶质的或是清澈的，像是Eve received a beautiful crystal vase for her birthday. Eve 生日时收到一个漂亮的水晶花瓶，或是 Henry watched the fish swimming in the crystal clear river. Henry 看到鱼儿在清澈的河水里游泳。
Okay, so again, we're talking about the sights to see in Sydney, Australia, and the third paragraph here goes on to say, another must-see is the Sydney Harbour Bridge, an enormous steel structure affectionately nicknamed the coat hanger due to its arch-based design. That's interesting. I've seen pictures of it, and indeed, it does kind of look like a coat hanger. We're describing this structure as a must-see. A must-see is something you gotta check out. Like if you're in Paris, of course, a must-see would be the Eiffel Tower.
Of course, or another must-see would be the Louvre Museum in Paris. So there are quite a few must-sees, it seems, in Sydney, and it's got a lot of interesting nicknames for things. The Australians do tend to love to nickname things. And of course, I've also seen the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Its shape does rather resemble a coat hanger. Now, they say that if you're feeling adventurous, you can even book a tour to climb up the 134-meter tall bridge. So I'm not sure that I feel quite so adventurous. However, if you are in search of adventure or you want to do something slightly more challenging than just sightsee, if you actually want to do a physical activity combined with the sightseeing, then going up the bridge is an activity that you might enjoy, and they say that's an adventurous activity.
And it goes quite high. It is a 134-meter tall bridge. So again, if you're adventurous, you could check out climbing the coat hanger, which is how it's known as affectionately, which means they don't mean that in a bad way. They mean it in a good way.
Yes, that's right. And personally, I enjoy slightly more relaxing pursuits. And if you also enjoy more relaxing pursuits, you might want to do something like explore the Queen Victoria building. The next sentence goes on to say, for a more relaxing architectural experience, visit the nearby Queen Victoria building. So if you're interested in architecture or design, well, architecture is the skill, is the study of designing and drawing and building structures. So if you're interested in how things are built, how things are made, and how they fit in the aesthetics of buildings, then this might be something interesting for you to do, especially if you're interested in earlier periods of time.
Let's find out some more about that building. It says, originally a market, this beautiful 19th century building has been transformed into a high-end shopping center. So it was a market at the beginning many years ago. It was just an everyday run-of-the-mill market. And it's an old building from the 19th century, which means it's from the 1800s, but it has been changed. It has been transformed into a high-end shopping center. Just like the shopping center in Taipei 101, this is a high-end shopping center, not for regular folks who don't have a lot of money to spend.
Yes, when we say high-end, we really mean probably more expensive. And at a high-end shopping center, you'll probably find really high-quality, well-known designer brands, things like Gucci and Versace and Michael Kors stores. So if you're looking for designer brands, then you'd probably want to visit that shopping center.
Right, so after you browse the shops, you can treat yourself to high tea under crystal chandeliers at the QVB tea room. So high tea here, what does that refer to, Candace?
Well, many years ago, laborers needed something to tide them over, and they needed some sustenance because they had to work quite long hours. So they invented something called high tea, and that used to be quite a popular meal. It was actually quite a heavy meal. It included things like meat and pies and beans and potatoes. So that was quite a heavy meal. It was something like dinner in England. And then as time went on, it sort of became slightly more refined. More fancy people, more high-class people would have afternoon tea in England. And that would include things like cakes and finger sandwiches and a variety and assortment of teas from all over the world. But when you go out into the Commonwealth countries, we still enjoy high tea. Actually, it's used interchangeably. Sometimes people in Australia or South Africa will say high tea, but what we really mean is afternoon tea, which is a lighter meal than what they used to eat.
Kind of like a high-class afternoon tea, huh?
Yeah, very high class. You can have a variety of teas and you have to drink your tea with your pinky up.
Ooh. Otherwise, they'll know you are a complete savage if you don't do that. And you can, of course, enjoy your high tea under crystal chandeliers at the QVB tea room. Crystal, of course, is 水晶. I could go into the definition, but it's way too complicated here. Crystal is just 水晶. And a chandelier, of course, is a hanging light with lots of lights. And, of course, this is a special tea room where you can enjoy that for a price. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to turn things over to Hanny, our beloved Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第二部分的第一句，他写到 Known as the harbor city, Sydney is famous for its beautiful waterfront location. 同学们有没有发现这个句子里面它没有连接词，而且呢前半句也没有看到主词它是用这个过去分词 known。 那这其实是分词构句的用法。我们来复习一下分词构句哦。用对等连接词 and 去连接两个主词相同的子句时呢，可以省略 and， 并且把其中一句的主词省略。然后呢，你再把该句的动词改成分词，也就是现在分词 VING 或者是过去分词 PP。如果你的动词是主动，就用现在分词 VING。被动就是用过去分词 PP。 好，像课文句子它原本可以写作 Sydney is known as the harbor city and Sydney is famous for 点点点，前后子句主词相同，都是指雪梨嘛。那我们可以先省略连接词 and， 再省略前半句的主词 Sydney， 这样就不会重复讲两次一样的主词咯。所以这个 Sydney is known， 这时候 Sydney 省略掉之后呢，我们把动词 is 改成现在分词 being， 就会变成 being known as the harbor city。逗号 Sydney 点点点点点，只是这个 being 又常常会被省略，于是就变成我们课文的句子了。好，那我们也来造个例句。Terrified, he ran out of the house immediately. 他吓坏了，立刻从房子里跑出来。那这个例句本来也可以把它写作 He was terrified and he 怎么样怎么样，简化之后就变成 terrified 逗号 he 怎么样怎么样。所以我们看到这个逗号先前只剩下这个 terrified， 它其实是由 he was terrified 简化成 being terrified， 然后再简化成 terrified 逗号后面直接接主词加动词咯。好，另外我们要介绍的是 be known as 的用法。 known 表示已知的知名的，当我们用 be known as 就表示以可能某个名称或是身份等等而为人所知，被称作什么什么。 be known as 后面接的名词通常是身份职业称号等等。举例来说， Paris is known as the city of light， 巴黎被称作光之城。那我们来补充两个相关句型。第一个是 be known for， 它是表达以某个特色特质或成就而闻名，后面可以接名词或动名词。就像我们课文第二部分，他在介绍雪梨歌剧院的时候，他写到说 An elegant building on the water known for its wide sail-shaped roofs， 一座以白色帆形屋顶而出名的优雅水上建筑。这边的 known for 后面是接名词，而 known 它就是由 which is known 或者是 that is known 省略而来的。我们现在再用这个 be known for 去接动名词来造个例句。 The actor is known for playing villains. 那位演员呢，他以饰演反派角色而闻名。好，再来第二个介绍的句型是 be known to 加上动词，这表示已知会做某事，以做某事而出名。举例来说 ，She is known to be a snob。大家都知道啊，她是个势利眼的人。这个 snob 就是势利眼的人。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Metropolitan. The newly opened subway system finally made the city seem truly metropolitan. Sightseeing. After a long day of sightseeing, the tour group returned to the hotel to rest. Depart. The bus will depart at 2 o'clock sharp, so please be on time. Elegant. The dinner was served in an elegant restaurant with a beautiful marble floor. Crystal. Effie tapped the crystal wine glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I'm Candice.
See you next time.